Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome. For those who don't know me, I'm Lily. I'm a travel journalist, have been for many years, and I just returned from Jamaica. I visited Jamaica approximately 6 weeks after Hurricane Melissa, and I want to explain why I went and what I'm working on in just a second. So, Jamaica is a country that I know really well. I've been visiting Jamaica since 2007. And I started my travel writing career there. I literally went to Jamaica to figure things out. The first time was as a tourist, and in 2008, I went back. I quit my job as a lawyer and decided I was gonna figure out what I was gonna do next, but in the meantime, I was gonna do photography. I've done a whole video on this that you can watch. So I have a long relationship with the country. I know it extremely well. I've gone all over Jamaica multiple times over the years, and the last time I was there was before the pandemic. I was there on assignment. I was sent to update half of the Rough Guide to Jamaica. So I decided to go for many reasons. The main one being that honestly, I felt in my heart like I should go, do what I can. And so I went to um, report independently on how tourism is doing post-pandemic, because I know the important role that tourism plays in Jamaica. A lot of people depend on it over there. It's a huge part of the economy. So I knew that I could, really tell people what it was like, because I saw from my last video that I did about 2 weeks after Melissa, when I started understanding, also because I have sources there, that actually some areas are recovering very quickly, like Negril Beach, for example, and some of the hotels were trying to get back, but people weren't going. There were mass cancellations. So I felt like there was a bit of nuance missing. No one was really talking about the importance of tourism. And I understand why, because obviously there are more important things. There are lots of people who've lost their homes, lots of people who lost their roofs or their jobs. It's just like a lot going on. There's a lot of nuance, and it wasn't being explained properly in the news. And so the immediate focus was, as it should have been and as it should be, is to get people back on their feet, to get food, to get help, relief. But as the weeks went by, that story kind of remained the same, and no one was explaining the nuance. So there's that. There's the fact that I'm connected to Jamaica, and there's also the fact that I just wanted to bring what I could. And I took a suitcase of supplies of what I was told was needed, including things like solar lights, etc. Yeah, so I felt like I needed to do all of those things at once. And I went and I planned my trip to go across several of the key tourism related areas. I also spent time inland. So I'm going to describe to you where I went exactly. And so the other last bit I want to say is that, as I'm building my platform here to give you independent travel and tourism reporting, I felt like this was also an opportunity for me to show you the kind of news and content that you're just not getting. You're not going to get from the tourism industry a lot of times. And really getting at the truth of who's impacted, who's recovering, who's being left behind in tourism. So that's the general context. I will share what my trip was like generally. I won't get into the film that I'm producing from this. I can't wait for you guys to see it. I'm working on it right now. And that is the point of my channel, really the deeper reporting, as I said, into tourism. So I'll get started, and then I will take questions. If you have any questions about going to Jamaica right now or next year, I'm happy to take questions at the end. So where I went, I traveled to multiple parishes in the island. The places that I overnighted were Negril, Montego Bay, Ocho Rios, Kingston. And in between all of that, I also went inland to certain neighborhoods. I did go to the West End of Negril to see what it was like. I went to Green Island. I went to the South Coast. I spent a full day on the South Coast of Jamaica, the most impacted part of the country in terms of the storm. Places like Bluefields, Belmont, White House, Black River. I went all the way to Treasure Beach as well, which is a community tourism hub and one of my favorites. I've stayed there multiple times. And so I wanted to kind of see the recovery across different contexts, beach towns, cruise ports, rural communities, the capital. Moving between these places really painted a good picture for me in 10 days. 10 days of moving around, of what the recovery is truly like. First, I want to say I had absolutely no issues traveling, absolutely none moving around. The highways are clear, the coastal highways. Inland, where we went, was okay as well, navigating carefully. The airports are open. I flew into Montego Bay Airport. I left out of Kingston Airport. I went, as I said, into local neighborhoods, and there are definitely signs here and there along the way of the storm, things like downed power lines, tilted sort of power, poles, right? And but people are back out. They're back at work. Some are not. Some are. And it's just like sort of this normal, this sense of like we have to get back to normal. We need to continue our lives. And obviously, again, it's very layered. There are a lot of people who are also still suffering unhoused in shelters, hundreds of people still in shelters in certain parts of the country in the West. And then there's the contrast, right, of like going to Ocho Rios where things are just completely normal. They were completely unscathed from the storm. So it's for me, the big observation is it was very jarring to go from one part to the next because I could see there were multiple Jamaicas happening at the same time, which in a way is true in the past as well. But this time, I mean, in terms of storm impact and getting back out there. So, Negril Beach was, I mean, the beach road was just fine. Everything was just bustling. Jerk grills were steaming. I arrived at night unintentionally. We were stuck in traffic, but the grills were steaming. So the small hotels have reopened. Some people on the boulevard, Best in the West Jerk restaurant was just full of people. The lights are on, the power's back. So it's like you wouldn't even know what had happened there a few weeks ago. But the beach is still quiet, obviously, because there were a lot of people who canceled. You would see a lot of the old timers who did go to Negril to support because they know the importance of tourism. So the general contrast is that across the different parishes, there are different realities, the parishes that were impacted. And in those parishes, you'll see that there's power, water on the main roads, in the main tourist strips. But inland, where the tourism staff live and the workers live, they still don't have power at their homes. They don't have water. They're using it the old way. And in some communities, the garbage hasn't been collected since the hurricane. So this is the thing, is that staff are showing up, because they need to get back to work. They need their jobs. So they're going back to work, and at the same time, while they don't have electricity at home. Some employers are housing their staff. Now it's hard to say generally. I didn't do a survey or anything like that, but the ones that I spoke to, they have a couple of staff who had their homes completely just damaged, or their stuff is all wet up or whatever. So they gave them a room on property because, also it's not full. So why not help them in the meantime? So that was kind of nice to hear, but that's definitely not the case for the all-inclusive resorts, which we'll get to in a second. So tourism is restarting unevenly. As I just said, there are many all-inclusives that are closed, as you all know. Some have reopened. I'm not here to do a list of what's open or not. You can ask me later, but I did drive past a lot of the ones that were closed, and it's such a contrast because you see that everything shut down. You can see some of the roofs that were damaged. So they definitely had damage on some of their properties, some more than others. And you see the security guards still at the front. It's just really a bizarre atmosphere. And then some resorts, especially in the north, like we were like around Falmouth and such, or before getting to Falmouth town, there's one resort where, at the back of the resort, there's lots of little businesses, down the alley. And all of that was just dead. I mean, people are just sitting out there, like, and there's no one circulating because the resort is closed. So it's just like they were depending on that sort of foot traffic. I don't know what's going to happen to those folks, but that's something to know. And just because an all-inclusive is open, also, it doesn't mean that everyone is back. So, for example, I think one of the Rios might be open, but not everyone, not all the staff are back. They're bringing people back according to how many tourists they have. So they're on call, basically. So some folks told me they're on call. They don't know if the call is coming tomorrow, if it's coming in a month. It's kind of a really, it's sad, and it's a time of uncertainty. It's also a time of people to realize sort of, which brands are you going to support going forward when you go to Jamaica? Something to think about. So, on the other hand, and I want to talk about what really surprised me. Definitely, what surprised me was just a quick restart after such a devastating storm. I mean, a storm that people said was toughest, the most powerful storm in the Atlantic, right? In the Atlantic belt in a long time. A first category 5 for Jamaica. And the fact that people were already cleaned up the main areas where tourists circulate, visitors circulate, and also are trying to get back to a sense of normalcy is really impressive. I walked down the hip strip. I couldn't believe that 6 weeks passed. There was such a massive storm, and what I saw on TV, because it was nothing like that. I mean, you would see, like I said, there are cosmetic signs of things that are happening, but of like downed lines or whatever. But there were constant cleaning up crews that I saw electricity teams, walking down the hip strip, the stores. A lot of stores were open, waiting for people to roll in. Some were closed, but many were open. The coffee shops were open. Doctor's Cave Beach, which, as you know, has an entrance fee, was open. There were people there. The S Hotel had guests. I don't know how full it was. It's hard to say. I saw maybe a couple of like housekeeper carts on the balcony, but on the beach itself, I just wanted to see, and I saw a significant amount of people, not packed, but enough. Same with a resort called Deja Resort on the hip strip, open, had guests coming in and out. I also saw Toby's, where I stayed years ago when they used to have the Jamaica Jazz Festival in Montego Bay. I stayed at Toby's, and I actually happened to be there just as they reopened. And they're open. They're open. The property looks pristine. I mean, it's just like nothing ever happened. But of course, in the back, you can see some of the affected buildings, but they're working on it. The restaurant was open. That's another thing, was that food is available but limited in terms of the menu, obviously, because of everything that happened. The St. Elizabeth, all the farmers there lost most of their crops. I wasn't able to have ackee. There was no ackee when I was there on that side of the island. There was ackee in Kingston. Anyway, so the hip strip, walking up and down, dead. I mean, like, it was just didn't have a lot of people. It was very desolate, but at the same time, businesses are open and waiting people to come in. It's for it to be the height of the tourism season. It was definitely jarring to see that, but very impressive to see how the Jamaicans are just like incredible. It doesn't surprise me, the resilience, or what we call resilience. It doesn't surprise me. It's a mode of survival, but it's also just the things I kept hearing along my trip. You know, we have to give thanks for life. Being grateful that you may have lost your things, but you're still there. And the other thing I wanted to mention is I did spend a whole day going to the South Coast. And I wanted to go, A, because these are places that I've stayed at, overnighted, Bluefields, Belmont, White House, etc. Villas, small hotels, lots of Jamaican-owned, foreign-owned villas. And so I wanted to just spend a full day of driving there and seeing how things are. And I've never seen anything like that before in the Caribbean, I have to say. And I've been in places where there were storms and powerful storms, but not like this. I mean, Black River was just completely leveled, just exactly as you see it in the news. But to see it in person is really, it's really eye-opening, because it makes you think about the fact that the Caribbean is now subject to these superstorms, right? And everyone said it was a vicious, vicious storm. It wasn't just a storm. Like there was just water everywhere, and it was uprooting things, and it was just very vicious. So you could see that in the South Coast, going from Black River to Bluefields, Belmont, and a lot of blue tarps, as roofs everywhere, downed trees. I think Black River was probably the worst that I saw. At one point, we were driving towards it, and there was just these trees that were completely stripped of leaves and everything brown. And it varies along the coastline, but again, people were out there fixing roofs. The electric company was out there fixing lines. One of the things that I keep in my memory from that time is just seeing the women, the Jamaican women out there on the side of the road with their cook shops. They set up there's this one woman that I saw on the side of the road, and she had a cook shop, and her grill was running, and she was just out there to make a living in the middle of like a forest of brown sticks. Same all along the way. We saw, women here and there with their little shops. We stopped at Border, which is very well known for, the stalls where they sell fresh fish and bammy in St. Elizabeth, one of my favorite stops. So we did stop. We parked the car. We came out. We wanted to support some of the women, but also enjoy some really good fish. And it was there. They were back up. It wasn't completely full, but there were definitely, definitely more than 4 or 5 folks there. And steamed. I chose steamed snapper, okra, and a fresh pack of bammy, 4 or 5 bammy. The fish cost me like 20 US. And my driver who took me there had fried. I think he had fried fish. Oh, no, no, no. He had conch soup. Sorry. Yeah, he had conch soup and bami. Absolutely to die for. I mean, it tastes even better than what I remember. But the fact that they were out there and the women, were they were all catching up with each other. Some people haven't seen each other since the storm. And they just kept saying to each other, like, we give thanks for life. We have to. So that was good. Along the South Coast is also where we kind of handed out some of the supplies that I brought. I wish I could have done more, but that was my way of giving back, and also to be there to hear the stories, to hear the Jamaican voices that I'll be bringing to you very soon. And yeah, and I made it all the way to Treasure Beach. So we continued all the way to Treasure Beach, and Treasure Beach felt very desolate, but at the same time, people were out there, especially at Jake's. I walked through the property at Jake's. Is now open, by the way. I went, which is miraculous, but I went through the property at Jake's, and people were just milling all around the place, workers all over the place. It was active. It was alive. There was, reggae pumping through the speakers. It was just like, wow. And then, however, when I went onto the main beaches, the fishing village beaches and stuff, it was very quiet. It was also at the height of the afternoon, but very quiet. And you could see some of the cosmetic hits and the buildings that are hit. There was one guest house I saw where one of the buildings was just like almost falling over into the sea. There's just this really feeling of sadness, but I know that I've no doubt they're going to get back together. They're a really strong community. I spoke to someone there too and have her on film. I can't wait to bring that to you, so I can't share too much for now. But it was great to be there, to see it. And then, yeah, so that was a full day. Came back by evening. So I want to talk about something else, which is a contrast of what's happening in Jamaica right now. So you have more than 2,000 all-inclusive resort workers who are out of a job right now. That's just in St. Anne Parish. So I reckon it's in the multiple thousands because of all the other all-inclusives in the other parishes on the main tourist strip, the tourist belt, as they call it. And so I don't know what's going to happen to them. I really wonder what the hit will be on the economy. But again, let's remember that all-inclusive resorts also had their issues. Last year, there was a staff worker protest across multiple properties in Montego Bay and other places. And they were protesting wages, very low wages, poverty wages. I mean, honestly, poor treatment, lack of benefits, a lot of things. Just, a lot of these workers are also contract workers. So you have an industry that is literally enriching themselves on the back of many Jamaicans who are paid very little and just live paycheck to paycheck. So all of those issues are still simmering at the surface. So for the storm to have happened now, I think will bring out a lot of that further to the front. And I believe while I was there, even in Montego Bay, there was a organized sort of worker protest. It might not have been large, and that's not surprising because you have to be careful. People have to be careful about speaking out. Obviously, they live on the island. There are repercussions. So, yeah, there's a lot there that I'm going to break down later. And the other contrast is that there's a big push for luxury tourism in Jamaica right now that is happening simultaneously at the same time that you see people struggling inland in Westmoreland after the storm. And then you have on the highway between Montego Bay and Negril, you have these luxury developments that are going up. And and that's one of the things that surprised me, I saw workers at it 6 weeks after Melissa. They were probably even before, they were already up there continuing to build. And one of them is a luxury development, hotel and apartment development called The Pinnacle. and you can't miss it. It's just this huge 28-story, 4 buildings that are going to be 28-story, and you can see it from the highway. And it's just like this. It feels so out of place because everything else just doesn't look like that. And I haven't researched it. I can't tell you. I haven't done the investigation, but it's ruffling feathers for sure, and it's kind of showing a divide, a deepening divide, like many places around the world, between the wealthy and the not so wealthy. And so all of this happening in between people who are also struggling without jobs, etc. Yeah, so Ocho Rios was jarring because it was just like normal. Dance hall blasting in town, people running, walking all over the place, traffic. It's just like, wow, like, the usual Jamaica that we're used to. And yeah, that was lively. It was kind of hard, me having been to the South Coast, having talked to people who also struggled, people who are okay, people in different types of circumstances, and then going to Ocho Rios. And it's just like, I stopped in Discovery Bay too, and I met a chef there. He's a chef for a private villa. And he was just jolly. Like, he was just like, oh, this is great. Look, everything's fine here. Come on down. And it was just like, wow, So anyway, that's my whole spiel. I did go to Kingston, and I took the Knutsford Express from Ocho Rios to Kingston, perfectly fine. In fact, I was surprised because I've taken the Knutsford before and it was fine. But I had never been to that particular office in a Drax Hall in Ocho Rios, and it's very nice. It's comfortable. It has a cafe that has, breakfast and stuff like that, coffee. It was great. And the ride was very smooth, hour and a half or something. And Kingston was Kingston too. Normal, completely normal. I did make my way to Bob Marley Beach, which I'm so glad I was able to go. It's about 20 minutes outside of Kingston, going east. And as you know, that's one of the spaces they're currently in court to defend the access road to the beach, which, there are Rastafari families that founded, that created that whole space, that lived there for generations. And again, it's sort of the fight between developer and locals. And I mentioned that in the episode I have, the podcast with the Jamaica Beach Birthright Environmental Movement, JABEM. You can find that under the podcast category on my channel. So I did make it there. It's spectacular. I think the photos just don't do it justice. I had a great time there, had fish, and met one of the original family members there. It was great. Oh, I didn't mention, I also went to Little Duns River on the North Coast, another space that's discussed in the podcast. You can go look it up. So, right now I'm just transcribing everything that I've collected, the footage, the interviews, and working on putting that film together. And I want to make sure I do it correctly. So that's going to take just a little bit of time. And yeah, so I'm here to answer any questions you have if you're here on the live. If you are not, I'm going to repost this. So feel free to leave a comment, leave your questions in the comment as well, and I'm happy to answer. The general message I want to share is that absolutely go to Jamaica. They need the tourism, but also you'll have an incredible experience. I personally, I'm so grateful I listened to myself and to my heart and to my gut to go on the ground. And this is sort of what I want to do more of as well, to bring to you guys. But remember that there's a reality that's very different from the one that you often see on mainstream news. Mainstream news is important in terms of raising awareness, humanitarian assistance, and things like that. But it's also important to understand that there's nuance and that not everything is destroyed at all in Jamaica. And half of the island is completely fine. And then within the other half that was impacted, there are different levels of recovery. But Negril has been ready, open, everything. Montego Bay is also getting back on its feet, reopened. I will say that at Toby's, I didn't have hot water, but that was no big deal for me. I was only there for a day. But the resorts do, like the S Hotel has it, and I'm sure Deja Resort has it. So everything is open again. Like Ocho Rios, totally fine, never impacted. Port Antonio, totally fine. Kingston, totally fine. South Coast, however, is where it's not so fine. and places like Beaumont, Bluefields, they're working hard to get back at it by the next quarter. But if you're planning on going to Jamaica, understand that it's not about guilt or charity or anything like that. It's just understanding where and how you spend your money when you go. It's more important than ever to understand that. It's something that I've said so many times across my career, but this is important to know now. Book locally owned hotels, Jamaican owned hotels if you can, or locally run hotels, because they have a different impact on the local economy. They put money directly into people's hands. That's not to say you should never stay at an all-inclusive, because it's not black and white. But do your research. If you're absolutely set on staying at one that's open, do your research. What have they done for workers since the storm? How can you find that out? Just dig. Look at the articles online in Jamaican newspapers and ask. Reach out to reporters. Ask them. I'm sure they'll be happy to answer your questions. But please spend local, book local, spread the money. Spread the goods. Eat at a local restaurant. I didn't spend that much. Even when I looked at my budget, I didn't spend that much because I ate local the whole time, buying from small guys and small shops and small restaurants and Jamaican restaurants. So that's really what I want you to know, is no hesitation about going. None. People are already coming back. There's a little bit of uncertainty as to what January will be like, and February and such. But if you're curious and if you're hesitating, as many of you were in the other video, don't hesitate. Go. Your presence will be so welcomed. And that's what I felt. I was, after so many years away, even with my connections, I just felt so welcomed, and I left with even more gratitude for the way that I was welcomed. There was so many times even that people didn't even want to take my money, like literally like 3 different instances where they provided me with a brief service, and I just wanted to tip them, and they were like, no, it's okay, or like, oh, you sure, whatever. I'm like, what? Just really great. And remember, I traveled solo, and it was perfectly fine. Didn't take unnecessary risks, but at the same time didn't feel like I was watching them. No, everything was just totally fine. And so don't hesitate, book. Let's get Jamaica back to where it was in terms of the local tourism economy. Support locals, and listen to people, listen to their stories, and ask them how things are. Honestly, I'm sure they'd be happy to share. They were very happy to share with me. In fact, I'm very grateful that many of them confided the truth, confided their truths in me. So that's it, guys. By the way, I funded this trip on my own. I was not sponsored in any shape, way, or form. And I was actually invited by the tourism board, by Jamaica Tourist Board, as I often have been in the past as a journalist. But I turned it down because, well, for many reasons. One is that the trip was going to take people to Ocho Rios, Port Antonio, Kingston. And, the idea was to spread the message that there are places that are unaffected. I get it. That's their job, But for me as a journalist, I didn't feel that's where the story was. And I didn't feel that that's what people had questions about. So and then I know Jamaica so well. So I have a separate relationship with it. And also the content that I'm trying to create on this channel is really one of a kind, that you'll learn about things about travel and tourism that no one else is telling you about, that you should know, that you should perhaps would want to understand as well. So I funded it myself from the little monies that I made this year. Very grateful for that. Thank you for being here. Your presence supports this kind of work, is what I want to make clear. And I hope to make more of it. So if you're also interested in joining my membership, my channel, or helping in other ways, more than welcome. Thank you. And so that's a wrap, guys. That's what I wanted to tell you about my trip to Jamaica. I'll be sharing photos on the community wall here on YouTube. You can also check out my Instagram for some of my posts. But in the meantime, that's all while I work on the film that I'm putting together. That will be ready sometime in January. I'll give you a heads up. So remember, every Sunday here, something new, usually at 12:30, but this time I decided to do it live. So I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope that if you have questions, you will leave them in the comments. Reading a comment here. Would you encourage tourists to travel to areas more impacted or less impacted? Was considering going to Portland this time because of the hurricane. Um, I would encourage you to just go, and yeah, if you want to go to Portland, nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's still the local economy, right? Just book local, stay local, spend local. If you wanted to go to Negril, Montego Bay, totally fine. You know, if you wanted to go and support Treasure Beach, absolutely fine as well. I would say the most impacted are probably that are not ready yet are Belmont, Bluefields, White House. It's going to take a little bit of time for them to, to reopen and stuff. But otherwise, I think that, Treasure Beach, absolutely. They're happy to see you back. Jake's, as I said, is reopened. There are rental villas that are open. My Irie Jamaica. I'm happy to post the links in the comments. And they're already receiving people, by the way, in Treasure Beach for the holidays, for Christmas, for New Year's. So I would encourage people to, I think my biggest encouragement is just to go and stay local. And that doesn't mean you're giving up comfort. There are lots of really incredible Jamaican owned guest houses, boutique hotels, villas all over the coastline. You know, they just don't get as much press, unfortunately, as the all inclusive resorts, but they do exist. Uh, yeah, so that's my advice. I hope that helps. Another person said, "Oh, Dion, hi. I've never been to Jamaica. What would be the area to stay for? Oh, for a first-time visitor. Oh my gosh, you've never been to Jamaica. You're gonna love it. Wow, that's a really good question. My first time in Jamaica was in Negril, and I think Negril is really the perfect spot for a first-timer for many reasons. One being that it has so much choice in Jamaican-owned or locally owned boutique hotels that are just lovely, whether it's on the beach side or the cliff side. The cliff side right now, I have to admit, is a little bit, it's open. It's changed a lot. Like I knew it when it was really, really alive and bubbly, but they need help. They need help to get more of those little shops up and running. But definitely some of the hotels that are open, like the Rock House, Tensing Pen. On the beach side, however, I found it was a really nice atmosphere, and I recommend that. You could stay at Rondell Village, long-time Jamaican-owned property that's lovely right on the beach. Another one is Shirella Inn, also absolutely lovely, Jamaican-owned, long-time family-owned as well. There's so many choices, and I like it because it's sort of, you're in a hotel, but you can also interact, with Jamaicans. You can feel the culture. You can go out to eat. There's lots of little roadside eateries, restaurants. I mean, it's just like a very, I like it, I think it's great for a first timer. So that would be my advice. Okay. And then, take day trips. Unfortunately, some of the attractions are closed, like YS Falls was hit pretty hard in terms of the foliage. But Dunn's River has reopened. Little Dunn's River, as I said, is a great way to support locals. There are lots of others that will come online, I'm sure, as time passes. But there's never a dull moment in Jamaica. There's always a river to swim in or a beach to go to, or a drumming session. Oh, when I was in Negril, there was the restart of Calbert's Drum Circle, which one of my friends took me to. I'm so grateful she took me. Calbert and the All Star Drummers are pretty well known in Negril and in other parts of the island. They do an incredible show. This is traditional drumming, Jamaican drumming, and he does workshops. And it's, you just show up. It's on at Waves, a place called Waves on the beach in Negril, every Wednesday, 3 to 5 p.m. I was there for the restart. He just decided to bring people together again, which I think is a lovely idea. A great first day I had. And we had our drums and we were practicing, and it was just great. So that's that, guys. Like I said, if you have any other questions, please do drop them in the comments. And thank you so much for being here and for listening and for supporting my work and my channel. All right. I want to wish everybody a great holiday season. If you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas to you and yours. And I'm sure I'll see you guys before the new year, but Happy New Year when it comes. All right. One love. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.